There's something strange happening that most people never stop to question. Millions of people sit in front of their TVs every week, screaming, celebrating, or completely devastated because 11 strangers lost a game. They paint their faces. They rearrange their schedules. They feel genuine emotional highs and lows over something that doesn't directly affect their lives. And then there's another group, a quieter group, people who watch all of that and feel nothing, no excitement, no attachment, no urge to care. And according to neuroscience, this difference isn't random. It might come down to how your brain is wired. Stay with me, because once you understand this, you'll never look at sports obsession or your indifference the same way again. Let's start with the assumption most people make. If you don't care about sports, something must be off. Maybe you're boring. Maybe you lack passion. Maybe you're missing some essential part of being human. But that assumption is wrong. Not caring about sports doesn't mean you lack depth. It doesn't mean you're disconnected. And it definitely doesn't mean something is wrong with you. What it actually means is that your brain processes belonging, reward, and meaning differently from the majority. And that difference is more interesting than most people realize. So why do so many people care so much about sports in the first place? To understand that, you have to go way back. Humans are tribal by nature. For most of our history, survival depended on belonging to a group. Your tribe protected you, shared resources, and increased your chances of staying alive. That instinct never disappeared. It just evolved. Today, sports function as modern tribes. The jerseys, the chants, the rivalries, they're all symbolic ways of recreating that same sense of belonging. And your brain responds accordingly. When someone watches their team play, their brain releases oxytocin, the same hormone associated with bonding, trust, and connection. The same chemical involved when you feel close to family or loved ones. In other words, the brain is literally treating a group of athletes as if they're part of your social circle. That's why losses feel personal. That's why wins feel like shared victories. But here's where it starts to separate. People who don't care about sports often show lower levels of what psychologists call tribal identification. Their sense of identity isn't strongly tied to belonging to a group. They're more individualistic, more internally defined. They don't feel the same need to attach themselves to something bigger in order to feel complete. And there's actual research supporting this. A 2019 study found that individuals with low interest in sports displayed significantly less us versus them thinking. They were less likely to automatically categorize others as allies or enemies based on group affiliation. In simple terms, they don't instinctively pick sides. They don't feel compelled to emotionally invest in a team just because it represents something. But the difference goes even deeper into how the brain experiences reward. Think about the feeling right before opening a gift. That anticipation, that excitement, that's dopamine. Now imagine experiencing that feeling over and over again, every few seconds. That's what sports fans experience during a game. Every play, every near miss, every unexpected turn. Their brain is constantly receiving small bursts of anticipation and reward. And here's the critical part, it's unpredictable. You don't know if your team will win. That uncertainty creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive reward pattern known. It's the same principle behind slot machines. You don't win every time, but you win just enough to keep coming back. Studies using fMRI scans have shown that watching sports activates the same reward centers in the brain associated with gambling and other highly compelling behaviors. The brain doesn't really care where the dopamine comes from. It just wants more. Now flip that. For people who don't care about sports, that system isn't triggered the same way. Vicarious competition, watching others compete, doesn't activate their reward circuitry in a meaningful way. And this might not just be psychological. It could be biological. Research from the University of Chicago suggests that variations in dopamine receptor genes can influence how much someone enjoys competitive spectator activities, which means something simple, like not caring whether a team wins or loses, might partially come down to your DNA, not a personality flaw, not a lack of interest, just a different neurological response. If you're listening to this and thinking, that's exactly how I feel, I'm curious. Have you always been this way, or did something change over time? Let me know in the comments. I read more of them than you think, and your answer might help someone else understand themselves better. There's another layer to this. Sports fans often engage in something called purging, basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they say, "We won." But when their team loses, it becomes, "They lost." That subtle shift in language reflects something deeper. It's a way of attaching success to your identity without fully attaching failure. People who don't obsess over sports tend to do this less. Their sense of self is more stable, less dependent on external outcomes they can't control. They don't need someone else's victory to feel successful. And they don't distance themselves from loss in the same way because they weren't emotionally invested to begin with. Now, here's something that sounds contradictory. Sports fans often score higher on certain measures of empathy. They practice caring deeply about people they've never met: athletes, teams, entire organizations. So why don't non-sports people feel that same empathy in this context? It's not that they lack empathy, it's that they allocate it differently. Empathy isn't unlimited. You can't deeply care about everything. So your brain prioritizes. For sports fans, a significant portion of that emotional energy goes into teams, players, and narrative. For non-sports people, that same energy gets redirected toward relationships, creative work, ideas, personal growth, social causes. A 2021 study found that individuals with low interest in sports scored higher in openness to experience, as well as appreciation for art and beauty. They're still seeking meaning, connection, and emotional depth. They're just finding it somewhere else. And sometimes, there's another reason. For some people, not caring about sports isn't just preference, it's protection. Maybe they felt excluded growing up. Maybe gym class wasn't a place of belonging. Maybe sports culture felt aggressive, competitive, or unwelcoming. Or maybe they just never understood why people care so deeply about something that feels disconnected from real life, so they disengaged. Not because they couldn't care, but because they chose not to. At the core of all of this is one fundamental difference: how you experience meaning. Sports fans tend to find meaning in narrative: the underdog story, the comeback, the rivalry, the uncertainty of not knowing what will happen next. It's real-time storytelling with emotional stakes. For non-sports people, that same unpredictability can feel empty. They look at it and think, why would I invest emotionally in something I can't control, involving people I don't know, in an outcome that doesn't change my actual life? And that perspective isn't wrong, but neither is the other. It's just two different ways of engaging with the same human need: for story, for meaning, for connection. Researchers describe this difference as parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Sports fans build one-sided emotional relationships with teams and players. They feel connected even though there's no real interaction. Non-sports individuals often prefer direct engagement. They want their emotional investment to matter, to influence outcomes, to exist within relationships where there's reciprocity, where they're participants, not spectators. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, known for his work on flow states, found that deep immersion and fulfillment can come from many different activities. For some, it's watching a game. For others, it's creating, building, learning, or exploring. The mechanism is the same. The outlet is different. And here's something people rarely talk about. Those who don't obsess over sports often report feeling more present in their own life. They're not spending hours emotionally invested in someone else's performance. They're engaged in their own challenges, their own progress, their own story. And there's something quietly powerful about that. So what does all of this actually mean? It means that not caring about sports doesn't make you disconnected from the human experience. You're not missing something essential. You're not less passionate. You're not less capable of connection or meaning. You're just wired differently. Your reward system, your sense of identity, your empathy distribution, your way of finding meaning, all calibrated in a different direction. So the next time someone asks you, "Did you see the game?" and you genuinely couldn't care less, don't overthink it. You're not broken. You're not boring. You're just playing a different game. And it might be one where the outcome actually belongs to you. If this made you see yourself a little more clearly, there's a high chance you'll relate to my next video on how quiet people process the world differently. Subscribe and watch that next, because the way you think might be your biggest advantage, and most people completely miss it.